Try seeing things from my perspective. Because if you just come down and look around, and then maybe you could see the way I see things. Because obviously you don't understand. This kid thing's a really big deal. I really need a kid. I really need somebody to carry on the line because I can't really have one of my slaves become the master of the household. I really need a kid. So if you just get the perspective right, God, then maybe you'd understand, and maybe then you would just start helping me out the way I need help. He said, look, God. Because God's not looking. If we could ever get the mindset to get an heaven to earth perspective, if we could ever start looking from earth down to heaven and seeing the way God sees the situation, we'd stop telling God to look around. Abraham told God, look. And what's really funny, this is really funny to me. In verse 5, it says, he, referring to God, took him, Abraham, outside and said, look at the stars. Abraham not only was looking from an earthly perspective, but Abraham was already confined in the way he was thinking. Abraham had a 10 by 10 space to look around in. And he's saying, God, don't you just understand all of this? Sitting in the middle of a tent saying, God, just look around and understand that my situation is terrible and I need you to fix it. And you promised and you said that you were going to do it. And you're not doing it anymore. God takes Abraham and says, look, I'm your shield. I am first. If you can get me first, then I can take you outside. I can give you a heaven to earth perspective, and I can say, look, as many as the stars are will be your children. The gift that I promised to you is so much bigger now. Once you start to look at it from my perspective, now you can have everything. God is willing to give you everything. Everything that you need to achieve what he has called you to do. But you've got to start looking first to him as the gift that he truly is. We talk all the time at Christmas time about how Jesus was the perfect gift. But it's so cliche. And it's so washed over. And we don't really think about just how great it is to have such a marvelous gift given to us. We really make it so minute. We have, isn't it great that you got saved? And now, guess what all you can get? But really, our focus should be so excited about, guess what? You got saved. You were going to hell. You were on a road that was straight and running there. And now, you have heaven as an eternity. You have a Father that loves you more than any father has ever loved anybody. You have a friend that'll stick closer than a brother. You have a counselor and a comforter. You have all these magnificent things. And we it's just one little thing. Well, you got saved. Now let's talk to you about what you need to know. But we never focus on the gift of Christ, the gift of God, the gift of the Holy Spirit. These things are the things that are treasured. These things are the things that should be at the forefront of every moment of your life. We go and we come in here and we focus a little bit more on it, but we really ought to be doing it out there in the day-to-day, in the workplace. We should be having glorious experiences in our workplace. While we're building houses, while we're teaching at school, while we're creating things, while we're working down at the restaurant, we should be having glorious experiences. We should have people being set free from demons in the middle of IHOP, the Waffle House, not. We should be having those experiences. Was it Calypto Sonadad said he was a plowboy, and he said, I work with my hands on the reins, my eyes on the plow, and my thoughts on God. Because if we could ever just get to a place where every moment is consumed by him, because he is our shield. He is our exceeding and great reward. There is a mighty reward to be found in God. God explains to Abraham all that he's going to be given. And I would go into that, but we'd be here for a while. Let's go chapter 22, and I want to show you something. And it feels to me like Abraham really got it. Abraham understood. God is my reward. And my son is going to be secondary. And if you read through the story, you begin to see what's interesting to me at the end of chapter 13, chapter 18, is the last time in which Abraham is mentioned to have built an altar. The next time that Abraham is mentioned to build an altar is in the middle of chapter 22. So that's interesting to me because from chapter 12 to chapter 13, Abraham builds 4 altars every time he moves. Then he moves repeatedly and never builds an altar. But, so we were in chapter 15. God gave Abraham the promise and said, I am your shield, I am your reward. And then Abraham stops building altars. But anyway, I'll preach on that sometime. Chapter 22. Again, after these things. That's just the way they start these chapters. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he's now Abraham, here I am, he answered. Take your son, he said, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. I'll give you a quick understanding if you've never read the story of Abraham. Abraham ends up trying to make a son on his own. He ends up having a son named Ishmael with one of the slaves. And then God ends up explaining to Abraham that is not the son that will inherit things. And he has a son with his wife, Sarah, who is given to them by God. They name him Isaac. And at this point, Isaac is a young man. And God comes to Abraham and he says, I need you to take your son, go where I will tell you, and I need you to kill your kid. Now, this seems a little odd. Because God said, I'm going to give you a kid, and your kid is going to be the father that stretches out. You're going to have this offspring that is huge. You're going to have this number of descendants. And Abraham's standing there with one kid, because he's already sent the other kid out with a bottle of water. Said, shoo. So he's got one kid, and God said, I need you to kill him. Seems really inconvenient. But there was a place in Abraham's heart that God once sat there, and as time waned, Isaac again began to take that place. God had a place, a shrine in the middle of Abraham's heart that was his. And it was his until God said, Abraham, you're going to be a father. And then Abraham began to think about that and get so excited about that God had to remind him, I'm your God, and I am the one that sits in the middle of your heart. And so Abraham corrected it. Now here we are years later. Abraham has the promise. He has received the gift that God intended to give him. And it's now sitting where God should be sitting, in Abraham's heart. And it's so sad to see that we as humans have a tendency to take things that we know aren't God and make them more important than they should be. We have this tendency that, well, God gave it to me. And it is so true, because Sarah was like 90. There's no way she's having a kid. God gave her a kid. So we know God gave Isaac to Abraham. But Abraham put Isaac in a place he shouldn't have been. Isaac became more important to Abraham than God was. And maybe you've gotten a promise, and maybe you've received the promise. Have you let it get to a place where it is more important to you than God is?